Radio, a fellow Vistage member, and your moderator today. Today's webinar is entitled The Newest Approach to Creating Recurring Revenue Streams, Software as a Service. If your company sells to other businesses, you may be trying to decide whether adopting a something as a service model is right for you. Well, you're not alone. More and more companies are realizing that transitioning their business to something as a service is the best decision for driving higher growth, more profitable and stable revenue streams. To learn what an XaaS model is, how to determine if it's right for your business, and how to efficiently execute and measure its success, stay with us for today's webinar. Our speakers include Karen Hayward. She's a managing partner of Chief Outsiders and has been involved with software as a service for over 10 years. Karen, welcome to today's webinar.
Good morning. Thank you, Bill. Excited to be here. And for those of you who don't know about Chief Outsiders, we are a fellow Vistage member company as well, and we are a national management consulting firm focused on providing fractional and part-time chief marketing officers to mid-market companies.
Thank you, Karen. Also with us today is Blaine Mathieu, the Chief Marketing Officer for Chief Outsiders. Blaine brings to clients an extensive career focused on growing businesses by clarifying their market strategy and positioning and matching that with effective go-to-market models. Blaine has over 25 years of experience in growing startups between 50 and 500 employees and in prominent private and public companies including Gartner, Adobe, Corel, Selectica, and Good Data. He now helps CEOs of mid-sized companies realizing at national management consulting firm Chief Outsiders. Ladies and gentlemen, Blaine Mathieu.
Yeah,
all right,
between 1 and 1:30. I got a
Thanks,
hard
Bill.
stop.
Actually, we got some background noise. If you could either mute yourself or if we could mute everyone else, that would be great. As soon as that happens, I'll dive in. Beautiful. Perfect. Well, again, thanks for the intro, Bill. Very well said. It's almost like I wrote it myself, so I appreciate that. Let's dive in. So we're here today to talk about what a so-called XaaS, I'm going to pronounce it as XaaS model is. How to determine if it's right to your business, is your business ready for it, how we're going to talk obviously about how to execute and measure its success, and then finally we'll end with a look at some practical tips. As was touched on in the bio, I've been involved in either SaaS businesses on the software side or helping non-software businesses transition to an as-a-service model over the last 15 years or so. So besides the theory, I've seen a lot of practical do's and don'ts for this, and we'll definitely end on that note. And then we will absolutely have time for Q&A, so please enter your questions into the question box in the software here, and Bill will be moderating the Q&A at the end. Karen and I will work together to answer those questions. There will also be 2 polls during this webinar, so for those that are seeing it live, you get to answer a couple of poll questions, and it'll be interesting, I think, to see where we are all in terms of thinking about a XaaS transition. So let's dive in. So who should care about this topic? Well, if you're a CEO or maybe somebody who's in charge of the go-to-market model for your company, a head of marketing or a CMO or a head of sales, or somebody who's fundamentally maybe an investor thinking about investing in companies that are thinking about this kind of transition or have already made it and are maybe trying to tweak or improve it, you should probably care about this. In particular, if you're looking to drive new sources of revenue growth, if maybe your company is growing, but the stability of your revenue streams is a concern, that's where an as-a-service model can definitely help. And then finally, maybe you've got a growing business, maybe the revenue streams are pretty stable now, but you're concerned that there could be a disruptor, a startup, a competitor somewhere, something around the corner with a new model, some innovation, not just in terms of a better product or service, but an innovation in terms of the business model itself that they can bring to market. And we know, all the analysts and gurus on the IT and financial services side are writing reports saying, 40% of the companies that are leaders of their industry today won't even exist 10 years from now, because of these market disruptions that are increasingly coming more and more quickly. And a big part of these disruptions actually is the adoption of new business models like SaaS business models. So when we say a XaaS, what we're talking about is something, that's what the X stands for, as a service. in which your customers subscribe to an offering for which they receive the value of that subscription over time, as opposed to paying a one-time, upfront fee. Now, this is not a new model, obviously. Some of you are probably chuckling at the 8-track tapes on the left there, and we used to subscribe to your 8-track of the month club and your record of the month club. Obviously, magazines have been delivering a value and an outcome, delivering content, information, and entertainment on a subscription basis, for many years. This notion of an as-a-service model really became a thing. It became a recognized business model concept when Salesforce in the 90s began to change the world of software from a model where people would buy software, install it on their own devices, their PCs or their servers up front, and then they own the software, to selling software as a service, or the so-called SaaS business. Now, of course, everything we're going to say here is applicable to the SaaS business, but by no means is this discussion limited to the discussion of software as a service business models, because increasingly it's other types of companies that are becoming as-a-service businesses. A very famous one that's got a lot of press in the last few years is GE, which of course produces industrial equipment, jet engines, lighting systems. And Jeff Immelt declared some time ago that GE is becoming a software company, a data company, a services company. And now, you no longer actually buy a GE jet engine. You rent the output of a GE jet engine over a certain period of time. Right? You don't buy GE lighting systems. You buy basically so many million watt hours or lumens of light for your organization, and you subscribe to that lighting service from GE. So, of course, they still do sell a lot of products the old-fashioned way as well, but they are one of the leaders, certainly in terms of large companies, moving toward an as-a-service business model. And of course, nowadays, companies large and small, and pretty well every industry, every segment, are considering how and if they could adopt an as-a-service model.
Blaine, have you heard of any recent interesting moves to SaaS or XaaS?
Well, it's interesting. Of course, I pay attention to this topic, and in yesterday's, in fact, it was in today's San Francisco Chronicle. There was an article about how Porsche is now testing starting in Atlanta. We'll soon be rolling it out across the country. A true Porsche as a service model. This is not just this is not a lease, right? There's not a lease for so many miles, but this is for $2,000 a month. You have the service of a Porsche. They cover everything. You do nothing. Unlimited miles. It's basically unlimited Porsche use for a month for $2,000. So literally trying to move the car business to an as-a-service business model. Another interesting one, I was at a tech conference a couple of days ago, and I was sitting next to a gentleman. I wish I could use the company name. They're a big tool manufacturer. You all know the name, but I can't say it because next week they're going to be announcing their first ever as-a-service business model relating to the tools they provide, and then the service they're going to sort of wrap them in. So I almost see things like this coming out on a daily basis, and they're always really interesting to see who's adopting this model. Thanks for asking. So what are the advantages for sellers? I don't mean Peter Sellers here on the right, actually, but I mean the sellers, vendors like you that are thinking about or have adopted as a service business models. Obviously, if you can get people to subscribe to your offering, it's more predictable revenue streams. This is one of the reasons why SaaS businesses historically have had high valuations, because you've got clients that are to some degree locked into the solution, driving a recurring revenue stream for you. And although you are incurring, some maybe significant sales and marketing costs up front, once they are subscribers, your costs in sales and marketing drop effectively, to zero or near zero, and that money is going to keep coming into you. So that's an advantage to sellers. And then I mentioned a second ago about how customers that subscribe to you can be sticky. even in the old line businesses like magazines and records. That's why they gave away the first 28 tracks for a penny, because they knew once you started that subscription, just natural momentum was going to keep you in it for extended periods of time. And that applies, of course, to things besides 8-track tapes as well. On the buyer side, a lot of advantages, of course. So lower upfront cost. If you have a solution that enables customers to receive the value of that solution over time, then of course it's a big barrier to force them to pay for that value all up front, right? So it matches the timing of the value received over the timing of the, of the payment of the money, which is definitely an advantage to buyers. It's also fundamentally means they're incurring less risk, again, because they don't have all, their exchange of value to you is all up front, but they only receive it over time. And then increasingly buyers are liking XaaS models because they see that this puts some skin in the game from the perspective of the vendor. Instead of sort of sell and forget, okay, the vendor says, you're done, I'm done with you, good luck, right? The seller and the buyer are in this thing together. Their motivations are aligned, and they will expect, higher levels of service over time. I think in the Porsche example, again, this allows the Porsche subscriber, I guess would be the right word, to be totally at ease that their experience during the lifetime of their subscription is going to be amazing, because they're sharing that outcome with Porsche. So first tool here. While I go through the tool, what I'd like you to do is make a note of how your own organization would rate on this readiness assessment on a scale between 0 and 10. I'll show you what the endpoints are, and I'll discuss the midpoint, but anywhere on the scale from 0 to 10 points. There's 4 elements here. Give yourself a rating from 0 to 10 as I talk you through this. So how ready is your organization today to adopt the XaaS model? Well, first of all, where's your pricing model today? On the one end of the scale, your customers are paying you 100% upfront for the offering. After they buy it from you, there's no more, collection of money going on. You're done with them, okay? On the other end of the scale, obviously, you're already selling by a recurring subscription fee. Somewhere in the middle is maybe you sell a product up front, but then maybe you've got some ongoing maintenance, or some element of what they buy is by subscription, but not the whole thing. All right, so give yourself a rating of 0 to 10 on your pricing model. This next one, I call it value expression. It's really about what's your market model, or how do you message to the market what the value of your solution. If you're selling mostly features and functionality, you're on the left side of the scale. Most truths is really focused on selling outcomes, right? And it's even beyond benefits, right? It's outcomes. It's selling, say, the outcome of a magazine subscription could be you will be a more intelligent, person, more knowledgeable about world events if you subscribe to The Economist, as an example. So if you're selling true valuable outcomes, you're all the way on the right. And if you're sort of somewhere in the middle, give yourself 5 points. The next one is how standardized is your offering. So on the 0 point end of the scale, you're delivering a unique solution to every single customer. It can be difficult, obviously, to XaaSify a business where every offer is different and unique. On the other end, you've got a completely standardized offering. Now, some use cases can be different. That's perfectly fine. Obviously, not everybody might use the offering exactly the same way, but you're 100% standardized. In the middle, you've got a fairly standard offering, but maybe there's some configuration, maybe some element of customization. But again, the more customization there is, the more you tend toward the left end of the scale. Finally, completeness. Is your offering literally the complete solution that's necessary for your customer to achieve their objective, to get the outcome they desire? Or are you just one piece of the puzzle? If they got your piece of that puzzle by itself, would they have any value delivered at all? If not, then you're on the left-hand side if you require a larger solution to get there. But closer to 10 points if literally you do provide the complete solution for X to your customer, then give yourself 10 points. All right, so tally up your scores, total them up, and the total of all your points together If you have 0 to 10, you're an A. 11 to 29 is a B. And let's see, 30 plus is a C. The poll is open right now, I see. So go ahead, enter in your category, the first, the second, or the third category. I see there is no ABCs. That's perfectly fine. So pick which one best describes you. And we'll give it about another 5 seconds here. All right, let's close the poll. Let's go on. And I see the results before me now. So 10% of you are 0 to 10 points. The majority were in that 11 to 29 sweet spot there. And 20% were 30 plus points. Really interesting. Well, let's actually analyze that a little bit deeper right now. So if you were 0 to 10, obviously, you've got significant work to convert your business model to XaaS. 11 to 29 is I think you're potentially ready, and really it's a reflection of both probably your organization and the marketplace, the market space you're in, but definitely you're getting there. If you're 30 plus points, my guess is you probably already have an as-a-service model to some degree, but maybe you're looking at tweaking it, improving it, optimizing it in some important way.
So Blaine, if a company has a really low score, does it mean they really should not consider moving to a XaaS model? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you're in that 0 to 10 point, or in lower than 10 or 15 points, I absolutely don't believe that means you should stop thinking about this now, right? In fact, most of the companies that become disruptors, that figure out how to take a quantum leap in terms of bringing their business to a new level, cross that inflection point, they're companies that that haven't done this before. Maybe it hasn't been done in the marketplace before, and they decide to make that move. So just because and again, your business is probably a reflection of the market and where the market has been historically. Just because the market has not been there doesn't mean that there isn't incredible potential and opportunity, right, to take advantage of. So if you're on the lower points, obviously your transition will be more challenging for sure, but the opportunity might even be greater at that end of the scale. So definitely continue to consider it. Okay. Tool 2, actually, this is our second tool. We're going to do a poll on this one as well. This is an assessment of the current level of pain, I describe it, around your current business model, okay? And you're going to use this again to basically assess. The first one was, how close are you or to being able to adopt, how ready are you to adopt a XaaS model? And this one, how much pain is your current business model putting you under? So the categories, the ratings are 0 means you're under no pain, everything's fine in this category, there's no desire, no need to push at all toward a new business model. 10 means there's extreme pain. All right, so give yourself a score of 0 to 10. The first one is around revenue growth. 0, no worries, you're hitting your growth targets, it's all good. 10 means you're far away from what you think you could potentially achieve. Your cost of marketing and sales, again, 0, that's all fine, all good. 10 means you think it's far too high for the return that you're getting for that investment. Need to continuously resell the product. Again, if that's a pain point for you, that every month, every year, every week, you have to resell the product to the same customers, if that's your pain point, give it a higher score. Cross-sell and upsell opportunities. So if you're gnashing your teeth because you're not able to sell more of something or some adjacent products or services to the same customer, give yourself a higher score on this one. If your customers are finding your solution too complex, in particular the complexity of engaging with you, right, of buying or having your solution serviced or maintained, give yourself a higher score. If your customers just want more value than you're currently delivering with your fire and forget product model, give yourself a higher score. If competitors are gaining share faster than you are, pain should be rated as higher. And then finally, if your business is either in the process of being disrupted or you can see that coming around the corner, give yourself a higher score on the pain rating. So tally up your scores. You'll be somewhere between 0 and 80, and we're now going to do poll number 2. And I can see the poll on my screen right now. I'm sure you can as well. Pick which category best fits you, and we'll give it about 10 more seconds here. Okay, let's bring up the results. There they are. I think you're all seeing that right now. Well, nobody gave themselves 61 to 80 points, so that's great. Nobody's in extreme pain. That's nice to know. Although the largest group was 41 to 60 points, you know, a fair, I guess you'd call it a fair expression of opportunity for more improvement there in terms of the business models. So 20 points or less, not too many of you picked that, but your business model is in great shape. I absolutely would continually reassessing on at least a quarterly basis, though, because these market disruptors, competitors, they can appear out of nowhere, and usually by the time they're causing you pain, they're already making significant progress in the market before you even notice it. 21 to 40. Yeah, you're in the yellow flag zone. Most of you are in, I call the orange flag zone. So you need to seriously consider XaaS, and obviously that's why most of you are here at the webinar today. So there we go. Good to know that nobody's in the red zone right now. So a brief discussion of some of the issues with making a transition from a non-XaaS model to a XaaS, and I'm going to dive into some of these in even more detail in a couple of minutes. So I'm going to go relatively fast on this, but obviously, any business model transition is leaving your comfort zone. Right now, given the pain ratings we just saw, a lot of you aren't that comfortable in your comfort zone right now anyway. So that's good to know. But to whatever extent your business is running, sort of it's optimized, you've got it systematized, you understand the market with respect to that current business model, you're going to be leaving that behind to some degree with the XaaS business model. So obviously that is an issue. We're going to talk more about revenue, cash flow, and profitability in the financial section in a second, but obviously making this kind of transition does and will have an impact on those issues, and we're going to give some specific examples here just in a couple of minutes. Think about a valued solution. I think the word solution is really important, and earlier we talked about a valuable what your customers are subscribing to when you adopt a XaaS model. They're subscribing fundamentally to an outcome, right? To something that is important to them. They're not subscribing, in say in the Porsche example, they're not subscribing to doors and leather and whatever, and they're subscribing to the complete experience, right? To the pleasure, not even just the pleasure of driving a Porsche. They're subscribing to the complete total experience of the ownership, the brand, the driving, the service, everything. That's what Porsche is fundamentally, you know, selling to its customers with this subscription model. And so if your model truly is sort of a fire, you know, more of a fire and forget product, then XaaS, you know, might not be for you. But on the other hand, challenge yourself to think through, what are the outcomes my customers are really trying to achieve with my product or service, right? Not what does my product do, or what does my service deliver, but what are the fundamental outcomes? And if you can think through that, then that's the start to thinking through how you can now sell those outcomes as a service, as a subscription to your clients. All right, and that can be a very important strategic thought process to think through the value of your solution in that way. Another thing that XaaS opens up more than non-XaaS models is the notion of cross-sell and upsell. The fact that, you know, if you can think of these outcomes that you're delivering, well, there are probably some highly related outcomes, some add-ons, maybe your customers want more of it. And so rethinking through what kind of value to deliver opens up the possibility to drive a lot more business through related cross-sell and upsell. And it may be even through partnerships, doesn't necessarily have to be your own organization, but that's certainly an issue and an opportunity. And then finally, you know, I call it an issue. It's absolutely an opportunity, but with many companies making the transition, this is a fundamental sort of roadblock and challenge. Is with non-XaaS models, the mindset of most companies is create the best product I can bring it to market, give it, sell it to my clients, my customers, and then I did my job because I gave them the best thing I could give them. I'm a great vendor. I did that, right? But with this model, obviously the mindset totally shifts. And it's not just about giving them the best thing up front, but it's about giving them the best experience across that entire subscription life cycle that you've got with that client. It really does put, things like your customer support or customer success organization in a different light. In fact, even just the names are different, right? Non-XaaS companies tend to have customer support or the support organization where you can provide help, with various elements of the product or service. But XaaS companies tend to rename that organization customer success because it's all about creating those successful achievement of the outcomes throughout the entire life cycle of that subscription, and we're going to talk more about this, but how you run your so-called support organization is really fundamentally different in the XaaS model. All right, let's talk about financials a little bit in financial modeling. So I think I've got 3 or 4 factors here to think about. So RevRec is a big one. Now, obviously, RevRec is probably more important to public companies because there are various rules around revenue recognition for as-a-service businesses that are enforced for public reporting. But it's for non-public businesses, it's probably more of a cash receipt issue. Is almost the sort of equivalent of this. So for a non-XaaS business, obviously, you sell them the product, you get the revenue, you get to recognize the revenue, and you get the cash all up front. But with the XaaS business, it's spread over the life of the product, and that could obviously have impact in the near term, especially if you're transitioning your business from one to the other. You could actually go through a trough where it looks like your revenues are declining for a year or two. Imagine that. And the reason is because you've gone from recognizing all this revenue up front to pushing it out over time. So the fundamental business could be doing amazingly well, but it looks like you're actually shrinking the business. And at a more tactical level, this can have an impact on cash flows as well. And that's exactly the next point here. So delaying cash flows, creating a model which allows you the runway to get past this, past whatever the difference between your existing business and your XaaS business will be in terms of cash receipt, is absolutely critical, because we all know in our businesses, cash is king. And then your investment in sales and marketing and the timing of that investment can be a little different. So one corollary of this move to thinking about outcomes as a service is, it may require a somewhat more complex positioning and messaging of your offering. It may require a bit of a longer sales cycle. If the market hasn't been using an as-a-service or subscription model before, it's not just your business that's changing, it's the market overall which is going through a transition. You might be on the leading edge of driving that transition. It can be good to be an early mover or a first mover, but at the same time, you're to some degree working to move a market. And so your investment in sales and marketing to make that initial sale, that subscription, may be higher, because it may be a somewhat more complex sale. Now, that is offset to some degree by the advantages to the buyer of XaaS, right, that we talked about earlier. So there are a lot of advantages to the buyer of a XaaS model, which is obviously why they're so popular these days, increasingly popular. But I would say, in general, it could be a larger investment in sales and marketing. And keep in mind, you're going to be making that investment up front, right, in sales and marketing, but only recognizing the revenue and accepting the cash from the subscription over time. So that's another challenge with your sales and marketing investment. And the last one we touched on a second ago with customer success, but this is not just about a mindset shift in terms of how you do customer support and transition that to customer success. You will probably have to invest significantly in a customer success organization, more than you're investing right now, and you'll want to do that because your customer success organization will be gold with not only retaining customers, making them super sticky over time, keeping that recurring revenue stream coming in, but they will be gold to grow those customers, right? To cross-sell and upsell, to expand after you do the initial land. And I say gold, but what I really mean in most organizations is literally quoted. They literally, your customer success often becomes quota carrying, effectively members of the sales team, but again, don't think of it with a classic sales mindset, but customer success holds targets for growing the business in a way that often isn't true with non-XaaS businesses. So you have to think about an increased investment in that organization, but also increased dramatically, frankly, in many cases, increased return from that business. Let's quickly talk about key XaaS metrics, and there's lots of stuff on the web so on these topics. So after we're done the webinar and after we've gone through this, type SaaS metrics. In fact, most of this work has been done in the world of software as a service, but virtually all of these metrics are applicable to a business, no matter what you're selling, whether it's a software product or anything as a service. The fundamental metrics and the concepts behind them are the same, and much has been written about on this topic, all the way from targeting the CFO level, if you're truly a guru in metrics, if you're running deep, complex financial modeling for your as-a-service business. There are many models posted on the web and whole websites for CFOs to go to find this information, down to very simplified explanations, which is more what this will be. So critical SaaS metrics, obviously churn rate. This is the rate that you are losing or so-called churning off customers, because the fundamental power of a XaaS model is so much based on retaining customers. Yes, you spend the sales and marketing up front, but because you're retaining that ongoing revenue stream for a long time, the so-called lifetime of the customer, then the lower you can make your churn rate, the more powerful the business model is. So that's a critical key metric for any XaaS business. Another big one is MRR or ARR, depending on how you run your business, how you charge. Many businesses look at MRR, monthly recurring revenue. And so again, when you look at revenue the old way, in terms of, you sell a product up front, you recognize all the revenue, because that doesn't happen in a XaaS model, a key revenue metric is monthly recurring revenue. What is the recurring revenue stream that you have locked in customers signed up to repeat on a monthly basis? Sometimes for larger enterprise if larger enterprises are your target and you're selling really big ticket items, you might look at annual recurring revenue instead of monthly recurring revenue. Monthly active users is another concept borrowed from the software world, but totally applicable to any domain. And it's the notion that if the people who are subscribing, or the businesses that are subscribing to your offering, are not active in some way, if they're not actually using the service that they're subscribing to, then they're not likely to be sticky. They're not going to stick around. They're not going to renew their subscription. They're going to cancel the subscription. So this absolutely applies to real world instances. So if GE is allowing customers to subscribe to their jet engines, and they find through the sensors, which they have all on these engines, to enable all this service and support they provide as part of the subscription, if they see through their sensors that the jet engines are only being used 20% of the time by a particular airline, then they know the odds of that subscription being renewed are probably pretty low. Right? They should look into that and find out what's going on. Why is this particular airline not making full use of this service that GE is providing? So this notion of active users can be really applied to any context. Now, it sometimes can be more challenging to define active for your business, but that is a very important concept. The notion of customer acquisition cost is pretty simple. It's the total amount you spend on sales and marketing to get a customer. And that becomes important in relation to the customer lifetime value. So the lifetime value is your estimate, basically, because in new XaaS businesses, it is an estimate. Let's be frank, you're modeling this, but you're trying to estimate how long will that customer stay a subscriber on average? How many months or how many years do you believe that customer will stay a subscriber on average? And you can use, obviously, a lot of data points from similar businesses, research that's been done. You can talk to customers, talk to them about their intent. There's a lot of ways you can try to estimate this number, but those two numbers become important because they turn into the LTV to CAC ratio. And obviously, the higher this ratio is, the higher the lifetime value of your customer is relative to how much it costs you to acquire that customer, the more profitable your business is going to be, and the sooner it is going to be profitable. Now, historically, in SaaS businesses, again, the first ones to make this transition, a ratio of 3 or higher is considered pretty good. Okay, if your lifetime value of a customer is $3,000 and it only cost you $1,000 to get them, then that's considered a pretty good ratio, right? Now, depending on what the margins are in your business, as you know, margins in software businesses can be fairly high, gross margin in the 60 to 80% in many cases. If your margins are a lot lower than that in your business, then your LTV to CAC ratio will have to be a lot higher. But looking at what that ratio is today and continually striving to optimize your business to improve it is really critical. So let's dive into a quick financial model here, and then we'll get into the tips and tricks and open up the Q&A. So in our scenario, we've got a product which was sold non-XaaS, in the non-XaaS way, with an upfront price of $1,500, but they've decided to offer it as a service for $100 a month. The same product for $100 a month. Now remember, it's not really the same product because they're not just selling the product anymore. They're wrapping it with customer success and focused on valuable outcomes and all that stuff we've been talking about, okay? The customer acquisition cost is, let's say it's $1,000, no matter which model is used. And the lifetime value of the subscriber, we estimate at around 3 years, $100 a month, 36 months, $3,600. Of course, our customer success organization is going to be working really hard, and they're going to have targets to make sure that that 3 years is exceeded. Here's what happens with the non-XaaS world, right? You sell it for $1,500, it costs you $1,000, you get $500. There's your profit. You get it immediately. That number never changes. That $500 is sitting in your bank from now on, unless you spend it somewhere else. For the XaaS model, in comparison, that's the blue line here, remember you spent $1,000 to get the customer, but you're only getting $100 back in month one, so you're in the hole by $900 on month one, okay? Uh-oh. And it takes you 15 months before these two models equal each other, before the effect on your cash and maybe your revenue recognition is equal. So now we're saying, well, why the heck would I ever want to do that? Well, this is why. Right? Because after you cross that barrier, of course, your customer acquisition cost is continuing to stay at zero in this theoretical example here. You've already acquired the customer, and assuming they are going to stay for 3 years, you're getting that subscription revenue over and over and over and over again. And when you ultimately develop a financial model which multiplies the power of what's happening with this one customer across cohorts of new customers that are coming in and joining and adding to your subscription model every month, it can be a little challenging to develop these models. But as you do, you'll see this becomes a sort of a geometric growth curve. And fundamentally, this is exactly why as-a-service businesses have been and continue to be valued by Wall Street and by investors much more highly, a much higher revenue multiple than have non-XaaS businesses, because of exactly what is being shown in this diagram right here. All right, let's get to the tips, and then we'll get to the Q&A. So these tips, again, I've learned through the school of hard knocks over the last 10 or 15 years, and let's dive in. So I say, don't mingle. What I mean by that is I've personally experienced numerous attempts to try to run both a XaaS go-to-market model and a non-XaaS model with the same company, using the same people, the same marketing effort, everything, the same customer success or customer support organization. I've seen that over and over and over again, especially by companies that are being disrupted by more pure play XaaS companies who went from the get-go with this model. You know, you're at a company that's not pure play. You don't want to disrupt yourself. You can't afford to do that, of course, but you've got to embrace this model to try to keep the disruptors from getting you. So what you end up with is a mess. You end up with a company that doesn't have either a very powerful, clear go-to-market model on the non-XaaS side, and definitely not on the XaaS side. So what do you do about this, right? Well, if it would be probably great if you could literally, make a hard transition, plan for it properly, over a few years. We'll talk about that in a second, make the transition. But there is an alternative. It's a little harder to pull off, but it can be done. And that's literally to separate out the XaaS business as a separate BU. And this XaaS business probably will have its own customer success organization, again, because they're comped entirely different than your old support organization. It'll have its own sales force. Product might be the same, because product, it's really what we're talking about here is the go-to-market model for the product. It might not even impact the product itself. That might be something you can centralize. But the go-to-market elements of your business will have to be, dramatically simpler. Or dramatically separated, I mean.
So Blaine, on that, quick question here. Are there any areas of a business that you think don't need to be separated? Like what could work for this kind of a transition?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. And sorry, I've been going on. I haven't let you get many words in edgewise here, but all good. You know me. Yeah, well, yeah, right. So as I mentioned a second ago, I think product development, R&D might be an area that can remain sort of centralized between the two parts of the business, because this is mostly about differences in go-to-market model, maybe not in the product itself. Although, again, say with the GE example, to enable their jet engines to be sold as a service, they did have to outfit them with sensors and telemetry, again, so they could know what was going on with these engines, provide this real-time support and service, because it was no longer just thrown into the hands of the buyer. So product may be somewhat less affected, say, than marketing or sales. But then, of course, you've got the G&A functions. You've got, finance and HR and various things that again, are not really specific to XaaS or non-XaaS. Although I would say on the financial side that, you do want whoever's helping you with your financial modeling, we'll get into this, I think, in one of the upcoming tips here, to understand the fundamentals of XaaS metrics, so they're not trying to help you measure the success of your business using a bunch of metrics that aren't applicable to the business. So that was number one. Number two, yeah, we mentioned this. It's all about customer success. Don't think about support as being a cost center any longer, right? Think about it as a profit center. These folks own upsell and cross-sell in your business. Give them a quota, and NPS stands for Net Promoter Score. I'm sure almost all of you have heard of it. I hope many of you are using it. Very simple yet very powerful tool, and Net Promoter Scores can be obviously a great predictor of customer retention, which is the flip side of customer churn, and the ability to upsell or cross-sell to customers. So customers, it's all about customer success. And you might have to be a little innovative in thinking what that means for your type of business, but spend the time to think that through. Now, we talked a little bit about stickiness and lock-in. Well, stickiness is what drives the predictability for your business, right? And it doesn't happen by accident. Like literally, you and your executive team should be planning from the get-go in terms of your offering, the outcomes you're delivering, how you market it, how you support it, to drive stickiness, and to make sure your solution, whatever it is ingrained in your customer. If you're selling to individuals, make sure that thing somehow becomes part of their daily life in a way that it would be painful to extricate from their daily lives. Same thing on the B2B side. And this requires, again, a lot of thought and maybe some innovative thought from the way you're thinking about getting your product into the market today. Keep in mind on pricing. So price, you might say, well, I'm the lowest price solution. That's my lock-in, right? Well, we know how ephemeral price value can be. It's a very easy for competitors, especially disruptive competitors, to come in and undercut price. So price is rarely the basis of lock-in unless you've got some fundamental structural advantage that is truly unrepeatable by others in the market. And unfortunately for us, that kind of situation rarely happens. The next tip is on gauging your runway, and we talked a little bit about this in the financial section, especially in relationship to cash, right? This whole thing will, I've done it 5 or 6 times now. In the real world, it will be harder than you think. It will take longer than you think. You use folks, and it's great that you're on this webinar right now, so you're already going down that path of getting some expert advice on figuring this out. Continue going down that path, and make sure you develop a couple of models. Develop a model that you use with your sales force, with your customer success folks. This is your upside model, and then develop a conservative cash model that assumes it's going to take 50% longer than you think it will to make this transition. Or if you're not transitioning but you're launching a new BU, that'll take longer and be harder and be more expensive to bring this thing to market. This applies to most areas of business. It absolutely applies to XaaS and SaaS transitions. This is the last one, and then we're going to get to the Q&A. Most of us, you all, and even if you own 100% of your company yourself, you've got employees that are basically investing themselves in your organization. Lots of uncertainty, and it used to be 10, 15 years ago, people didn't understand the value and the power of a XaaS model, and so they had a very short, fuse for some of the drawbacks in the near term, especially on the financial side. Luckily, that's changed. Investors and even, the general public is becoming more aware of the value and the benefits of these kind of models. They're willing to be patient, but be honest. Don't underplay the challenges that you're seeing as you're going through this transition. But as long as they agree with you that the outcomes are worth the transition, then it'll be fine. And I think that's actually about it. So we're going to open it up for Q&A now. Karen and I are both here to take your questions. So let's go for it, Bill.
Excellent job, guys. Perfect timing. We have a lot of questions. I want to remind listeners you can submit your questions in the questions panel on the right-hand side of the screen. Here's our first question for you, Blaine, is on pro tip number 1, you mentioned you should probably think about bifurcating your software or something as a service and your traditional lines. Are you suggesting separating these into 2 companies?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So when I use the term business unit, and that could mean obviously a lot of things. I think that's probably the genesis of the question here. But I think, fundamentally, other than some of the core services as I talked about, some of the core back office services, you really should be conceptually thinking of this as 2 companies. Now, an advantage of literally splitting it into 2 companies is you can have an organization that doesn't water down or affect the financials of the legacy company, right? So if it's important to you or to your investors that you can keep these things literally separated on a P&L basis and a financial income statement basis, then literally you can run 2 sets of books, run them as 2 companies. But whether you do that or not, I think it is important to at least conceptually think of these as different enough strategies, core fundamental strategies and go-to-market models that they are 2 separate entities.
Got it. Okay. Can you talk about converting upfront pricing to a monthly subscription price? What are the considerations, and is there a best practice?
Yeah, and of course, the answer to almost all these questions is it's very specific to the type of business that you have and the type of product or solution that you're running and who you're selling to. And a lot of it does boil down to your estimate of the lifetime value of a customer and the value the value of the outcomes that you're delivering. Okay? If you believe that you will have a stickier offering that will last longer, that will stay longer with your customers, that your churn rate will be low, then you can actually afford to charge a lower price for that product. Your subscription price can be lower, right? Because you're going to keep your customers for longer. Another way to think about it is, again, it varies so much between businesses and industries, but it seems like sort of 36 months or 3 years is sort of a good place to start, okay, in terms of how long a customer might stay with you. That's probably where I would start, and then start deviating up or down from there depending on what your product is. It's a rule of thumb. So one way to think about pricing is take your existing price. Let's say let's just make the math easy. Let's say you're selling the product for $3,600, okay, up front. Well, if you assume a 36-month life, and you're gonna have a subscription on a monthly basis, then you would your starting point could be $100 a month. Okay, you're even at that point. But now in almost every case, that $100 is just your starting point. You want to go up from there, okay? Because of course you are delivering a lot more value by selling your solution as a service than you were just by fire and forget a product for $3,600. So $3,600 is the low end. That's the bottom of your scale. And you should figure out how much more than this $100 a month can I charge my customer given the level of support and the valuable outcomes I'm going to be delivering with this. So that's maybe a place to start. Take your existing price, divide by the customer lifetime period, but again, that's the start. Don't stop there. Figure out how you can go up from there. And in your financial model, also work in the concepts of upsell and cross-sell that may not be a big part of your model right now. But if you can get, more customers on the base subscription to your service, you can drive an incredible profitable business with very low customer acquisition costs through upsell and cross-sell. So model that in, but of course also model in the cost of comping a customer success team to do that.
Brilliant. Love it. I have one more. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, I was just going to add one more comment to that. Upsell, cross-sell, super important. There's another consideration, I think, for people to consider is the client's switching cost. How difficult is it from them to migrate now from your software as a service or your XaaS model to another model? And that's a key element, in terms of factoring in risk and pricing opportunities.
Right on.
Makes total sense. That's great stuff. Okay, so we have another question about applicability to a company that's already a service, and this particular company picks up and delivers laundry services for residences and small commercial accounts, and customers are often long-term or weekly, but not usually with any contract. So is there something here for us?
Yes, that's really interesting. So the question, and this applies to many existing services business. They're already a service business, but they aren't a subscription business, right? And that's the nuance. So the good news is, you're already selling your value as a service. You just haven't made the jump to sell it as a subscription. And in this case, and in other cases, I think the answer is to think through what's the benefit, what value could you deliver to your customers by selling this as a subscription instead of just as a service, but that you pay on an ad hoc basis. Let me give an example of what you might be able to do in the cleaning domain, say dry cleaning or whatever the case is. You could allow your customers to subscribe to a shirt cleaning service for $10 a week. The benefit to them is the actual price they pay on a per shirt basis could be much lower. How could you lower the price that you offer them? Because you have this recurring revenue stream, it's predictable. You can manage your operations much more efficiently than you could today, and you can actually offer a lower price to the market. So maybe without a subscription, they're paying $3 a shirt. But if they subscribe to the $10 a week plan, they could get 4 shirts done, right? And save them 20%. So think about, that's one way, that one lens you could look at this through is the benefit they give you is that constant recurring revenue stream. What benefit can you give them in return? And I use an example of giving them a price benefit, and then to contradict my comment that pricing is ephemeral and be careful about price, okay? So price is one value that you can deliver, and think of all the other values that you can potentially deliver. Maybe for those that subscribe to your service, you can have an enhanced level of service for them that, again, reattaches missing buttons, that, you know, extra starch in the collar, whatever the case is, because again, you're no longer just cleaning shirts at $3 a crack. You're now providing a solution to help that person look good, right, and be successful. And so think through the extra value you can deliver to your customers for those that are willing to make that jump to a subscription. And frankly, that thought process is exactly how many SaaS companies have become successful today.
Great advice. Blaine Mathieu and Karen Hayward, I want to thank you both. I apologize to our listeners who had submitted questions we can't get to. We're overrun with questions today. Very fascinating topic. You did a great job, both of you, Blaine and Karen, in explaining a very interesting topic, and we really appreciate you joining us today.
You bet. It was a lot of fun, and I'm sure I'll get a list of the questions after. We'll be able to deal with them one-on-one. But it was, I wish you all luck in your transition. And I think you'll find it'll be a challenge, but fundamentally it is where the business world is going today, and you'll find it worth it. So good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Listeners, next week, Friday, October 20th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, join us for Fire Your Website, How Lack of Content Can Kill Your Leads with Tyler Yost. And on Friday, October 27th, on Fridays with Vistage at 10 a.m. Pacific, Help Wanted New Report outlines how to find and develop talent with Kathleen Quinn Vota, always a very well-liked speaker with us. Thanks so much for joining us with Fridays with Vistage. My name is Bill Black, and on behalf of Vistage Worldwide, I wish you all continued success. This concludes today's webinar.